Everyone said Real Madrid got scammed. Imagine spending 45 million euros on a kid who had touched the ball for just 13 seconds in professional football. 13 seconds. And in Brazil, they weren't calling him the next Pelé. They were saying, he can't score, he's not worth it, he doesn't even know if he's good. And when Madrid announced the deal, people laughed. They said it was the biggest robbery in football history. Because at that moment, Vinicius Junior had barely played for Flamengo. He wasn't dominating the Brazilian league. He wasn't even a guaranteed starter. So why would the biggest club in the world gamble on a teenager with more hype than proof? But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't about what he had done. It was about what he showed in flashes so rare that scouts couldn't ignore them. Because long before the criticism, long before the memes, this was a kid who was destroying youth football so badly that they had to move him up age groups just to make it fair. A kid who went nearly 90 games unbeaten, who embarrassed defenders so often that rival clubs tried to steal him away with crazy offers, who lit up South American tournaments with goals, assists, lobs, nutmegs, and moments that made scouts stop writing notes and just stare. And while the world thought Barcelona had already secured the next Neymar, Real Madrid were watching quietly, remembering the pain of missing out on Neymar years earlier, and this time, they weren't going to lose again. So when Barcelona blinked, Madrid struck, paying more, moving faster, turning 13 seconds of brilliance into the most expensive underage transfer ever. And that's where the real story begins. Because what happened next, the misses, the pressure, the Champions League nights, the transformation from joke to superstar, is something nobody saw coming. So if you think you know Vinicius Junior's story, trust me, you don't. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that scam became one of the smartest gambles in football history. So stay with me until the end, and if you love deep football stories like this, hit subscribe right now because the next one might change how you see the game forever. When Vinicius finally made his Flamengo debut, it was chaos. Not because he was brilliant, but because he wasn't. And the performance was rough, messy, rushed, the kind of game that normally gets ignored when a 16-year-old is involved. Except this wasn't normal anymore because Real Madrid and Barcelona were in a silent war over him. And Flamengo actually renewed his contract just to raise the release clause so Madrid could outbid Barcelona, which meant the second the 45 million euro move was announced, expectations exploded because only Neymar and Kaká had ever commanded that kind of money from Brazil. And now this skinny teenager was suddenly expected to be their equal before he had even proven himself at senior level. And the pressure showed immediately. Substitute appearance after substitute appearance with no impact. A start that only highlighted his mistakes, headlines calling him disappointing, and then came the moment that nearly broke him. Subbed on in the 75th minute. Subbed off before full time, a humiliation that turned him into a national punchline overnight. And from that point on, criticism became cruelty. Pundits didn't just question his decision-making, they called him dumb on live television. Some said he'd never wear the Real Madrid shirt, others predicted he'd be sold at a loss. But the worst part wasn't the criticism, it was the nickname. Because years earlier, a Flamengo prospect named Negueba had become a meme after failing to live up to hype. And in Brazil, calling someone a Negueba became shorthand for saying they're a flop. And now Vinicius wasn't Vinny anymore. He was the new Negueba, a label heavy enough to crush careers. But instead of collapsing, something shifted inside him. And in the very next game, he responded with 2 goals and a man-of-the-match performance, the second goal so confident he even rounded the keeper. And while that didn't silence everyone, 2 months later, he did it again, coming off the bench against rivals Fluminense in the Copa Sudamericana quarterfinals with Flamengo trailing, assisting the equalizer and winning the free kick for the winner, flipping the entire tie on its head, forcing commentators to admit that a normal 17-year-old doesn't change games like that under pressure, and suddenly the narrative cracked. Because the kid who was supposed to be finished started becoming decisive, scoring in semifinals, scoring in finals, leading Flamengo to silverware, delivering on his Libertadores debut with 2 massive goals to win the match, forcing his way into the starting lineup. And even though his numbers, 4 goals and 3 assists in 21 matches, didn't scream superstardom, the flashes were undeniable. And then the time came to leave for Madrid, and just as he thought he had survived the storm, a bigger one was waiting. Because before he even landed in Spain, Clarence Seedorf warned live on TV that he might not even play, suggesting a loan would be lucky, reminding everyone that even legends like Eto'o struggled at that age. And when Vinny arrived in Madrid, the pressure multiplied. He fumbled kick-ups at his presentation, struggled for end product in preseason, and was sent to split time between the B team and youth squad, which Barcelona fans celebrated as proof Madrid had been fooled until he scored 4 and 5 for Castilla, earned a Copa del Rey start with 2 assists and man of the match, scored off the bench to become Madrid's youngest scorer since Raúl, debuted in the Champions League as one of the youngest ever, assisted, played in a Club World Cup final, and by the start of the next year became the youngest regular starter in club history, earning Brazil call-ups and finally looking like the gamble was paying off. And just when it felt like the nightmare was over, when it felt like he had finally outrun the Negeva label, he ruptured ankle ligaments and was sidelined for months, right as momentum was turning, proving once again that with Vinicius Junior, every rise came with another brutal test. And if you think this is where the story slows down, trust me, what comes next is where everything changes. The injury didn't just slow Vinicius down, it shattered his rhythm, and when he returned, he looked lost, hesitant, like the weight of every insult had finally caught up to him. And after 8 months without scoring, when the ball finally hit the net, he dropped to his knees and cried, not out of joy, but relief. Because by then the memes had crossed the ocean. Spain had joined Brazil in laughing at him. Pundits called him a diver, a cheat, overrated, unworthy of the national team, and worst of all, the trust inside his own dressing room began to crack. Cameras once caught Sergio Ramos looking for a penalty taker in a shootout while Vinicius stood there with his hand raised, and they ignored him. Cruz suggested Rodrigo instead, and as his numbers dipped in his third season, things reached rock bottom when Benzema was caught telling Ferland Mendy not to pass him the ball, saying, "He's playing against us." Imagine being 20 years old and hearing that from your captain, from your leader. While Hazard, who cost nearly triple, escaped most of the criticism, Vinicius became the easy target, the symbol of wasted money. But what nobody understood was that pressure doesn't break everyone. Sometimes it builds them. And when Carlo Ancelotti arrived, everything changed. Almost overnight, his decision-making sharpened, his confidence exploded, his connection with Benzema turned into the most lethal partnership in Europe. Mallorca fans making monkey noises, commentators telling him to stop dancing, rivals accusing him of playing the victim, and yet every time they tried to shake him, he answered on the pitch. Involved in miracle comebacks against PSG, decisive against Chelsea, unstoppable in big moments. And when Manchester City stood in front of him, he scored a goal that silenced the Etihad. Then in the Champions League final, he scored the only goal of the game, delivering La Decimocuarta and becoming the youngest South American ever to score in a final. The first under 21 since Messi to hit double digits in goal involvements in a single campaign, but even that wasn't enough to earn universal respect. He finished 9th in the Ballon d'Or rankings while the spotlight went elsewhere, and the hate only intensified. A doll wearing his shirt was hung from a bridge in Madrid. Defenders broke tackling records trying to stop him. Entire stadiums hurled slurs even during moments of silence. And in Valencia, after being racially abused all match, he was grabbed in a chokehold and sent off while league officials claimed there was no racism problem. Imagine carrying that and still performing. Because from January onward, he produced 27 goal contributions in 26 matches, dismantled Liverpool in a 5-2 comeback, destroyed Barcelona at the Camp Nou, became the Champions League's top assist provider, and even when eliminated by eventual champion City, he walked off as Madrid's brightest star. And through injuries, through doubt, through racism, through betrayal, he kept rising until fans began chanting Vini Ballon d'Or in the Bernabeu. So if there's one lesson in this story, it's this. Talent gets you noticed, but resilience makes you untouchable. And the kid they called a scam, a meme, a joke, is now the face of the biggest club in the world. So to anyone still doubting him, be very, very careful. Because Vinicius Junior doesn't just survive storms anymore, he becomes them. And if you stayed until the end, drop a comment saying, Vini Vidi Vici. Subscribe for more deep football stories, and get ready because the next chapter might be legendary.